A woman named Mary returns to her hometown after spending some time in prison. Immediately, she is labeled as undateable, but she is determined to find a date for her best friend's wedding. In the opening scene, we get to see the protagonist Mary. She is an attractive 30-year-old ginger with rosy cheeks. Sitting in the police station, she writes the speech she has to give at her best friend's wedding. It begins with her talking about Charlene, calling her honest, loyal, and a good person. Getting out of prison, she says her goodbyes to everyone before exiting the gate. Arriving at the train station, she waits outside for her mother to pick her up. Her mother finally arrives, and Mary gives her attitude for being late. As they're driving to the house, Mary's mother tries to make small talk. She admits that they have missed her, but Mary doesn't believe that. She asks about Charlene and gets mad once she finds out that she'll be seeing her the next day, and not that same day. It upset her even more, the fact that the other bridesmaid will be Leona. Leona is one of Charlene's close friends. She is someone that Mary doesn't like, and I would say it's for good reasons. Seeing Charlene in her dress makes Mary smile, but she can't get the fact that Leona will be there out of her mind. They arrive home and Mary sees her grandmother. She doesn't expect much of a welcome, but her grandma doesn't even acknowledge her. Getting in her room, she puts all the stuff around and sits on her bed. Putting her earphones in, she looks at the pictures of her and Charlene on the wall. Unfortunately, she doesn't answer her phone, so Mary leaves her a voicemail. Not knowing what to do with herself, she opens can after can of beer and gets drunk. Heading to the nearest club, she tries to get in without a problem, but she ends up getting in trouble. A guy in front of her comments on the long line at the club, so naturally, she invites him to grab a couple of beers and get out of there. A girl standing next to him looks at Mary and gives her a dirty look. Unfortunately, things escalate and the guards tell Mary that she cannot enter the club. Mary wakes up the next morning to a text from Charlene, reminding her that they need to try on their dresses at Sally's. During the entire ride to the wedding, Mary thinks about what to put in her speech. On the way to Sally's, she sits on the bus, thinking about what she could say, reminiscing the time when they were a power duo that everybody was afraid of. Getting into Sally's, Mary stares at Charlene in her beautiful gown. She notices her and the two best friends finally hug after not seeing each other for 6 months. While Leona's trying on her bridesmaid dress, Charlene hands Mary a CD. It is a CD of what she's supposed to say or simply her final speech at the wedding. She tells Mary that she needs to work on her accent, and Mary responds by saying that they have the same accent, to which Leona laughs. Not letting anything slide, she asks Leona why she's laughing and even threatens her if she were to laugh again. The lady working there chimes in and warns Mary that she has big responsibilities being the maid of honor. Mary has to take a nice man with her as a +1 to the wedding, but she didn't know that. While Leona and Mary are arguing, Leona reveals that Mary's +1 would be given to someone else, as she's not expected to bring anyone to the wedding. After the fitting, Charlene and Mary sit together and catch up on everything. Mary admits that it would have been nice if Charlene were to call her, but Charlene claims that it was her that didn't want any visitors. She admits that Mary's not going to have a +1 because the plates are 60 pounds each. Before Colin's soon-to-be husband comes to pick her up, Mary begs her to cancel on him and go drink with her. Leaving Mary alone on the steps, Charlene hands her a list of things she needs to do. Mary does her best to get back on her feet, so she gets a job at a local fast food restaurant. She knows that has to include the groom in her speech, so she mentions the time she first saw him. Claiming to have known that he was the one for Charlene, she calls him a nice, kind-hearted person. The fact that nobody expects Mary to bring a +1 is what makes Mary want to bring one even more. She tries going on a date with one of her old friends, but he looks at her like she's crazy. Cupid's Arrow is the next place she tries to find love, but she tumbles across one of her old videos where she's beating up a girl. The next morning, she gets a text reminding her to get a videographer for the wedding. She sits down with the girl that's supposed to do the wedding, but she tells her that she's not free on the 28th of March. However, Mary doesn't take no for an answer and makes Jess cancel her gig. While Jess is in the other room, a guy that she spent the night with asks Mary to remind him of her name. Mary tells him that her name is Jess, but once he tries to get her number, reveals to Jess that he didn't even know her name. The guy gets out and so does Mary, but in a rather happy mood. Later in the evening, she goes to pick up some food when she sees Charlene and her fiancé along with Leona and her boyfriend. After getting the food, she heads to their table where she lies about having a date for the wedding. She claims that she has met a guy named John Carter and asks Charlene whether she can bring him to the wedding. Trying to be nice, Charlene tells her that she can bring him with her. However, her suspicion gets to her as she calls Mary the next morning, suggesting they all sit down and meet John. Despite forgetting who John even is, Mary lies that he's not free on weekends as he's working in a bar. Knowing that her lies have short legs, Mary goes to a dating agency to try her luck. The woman asks her what kind of man she wants, and Mary admits that she's only looking for a man to take as a date to a wedding. The woman struggles, but she promises Mary that she'll find a nice man, as she takes pictures of her. In the evening, she gets her makeup done by her mother before heading out for a date. As the guy opens his mouth, Mary leaves cringed out by his way of talking. She spends the rest of the night looking at old pictures of her and Charlene. Thinking about her speech as well, she admits that Charlene's always been there for her, the same as she's always been there for her as well. Missing her best friend, she decides to call her but it goes to voicemail. Mary goes on a couple of dates with guys who are not good enough for her until she stumbles across a guy that's looking for a date to a wedding as well. As he's talking about how perfect they are for each other because of their situation, a knock can be heard on the glass door of the cafe. Turning their heads, they see Charlene and she's excitedly waving at them. Before she can get in, Mary tells the guy to pretend that he is her boyfriend, and that his name is John Carter. Charlene seems to be very excited about the guy as she asks him to be her groomsman because he's handsome, and she wants good-looking people to be in her wedding pictures. She leaves the cafe happy that her best friends met a good guy, but Mary screws it up as she asks the guy to tone down the camp. Friday comes and Mary attends Charlene's costume-themed party. She reminisces about a time when she and Charlene would be enough for each other, as she watches her among a crowd of her friends. Not wanting to sit there anymore, she lets Charlene know that she'll be leaving, but Charlene isn't interested in that at all. Pissed off, she steals some money from someone's wallet before heading out. She gets into the club where she's not wanted only because she has a wig and sunglasses on. Standing at a table, she gets approached by Jess, the videographer for the wedding. Jess tries to make small talk but Mary gets anxious and leaves. In the bathroom, a random girl starts banging on the bathroom door, making Mary angrier and angrier. Mary gets out and gets into the girl's face, threatening to beat her up. Getting out of the bathroom, she tries to hide in the crowd but the guards find her and throw her out. Jess notices Mary sitting outside the club, so she approaches her when she sees that she's bleeding. They go to the ER and wait for their turn. Mary asks her how her night had gone and Jess admits that she spent her whole night hiding from a guy she used to go out with. Mary admits that she's been on a few dates herself but claims that all of the guys had been psychos. She even went out with a priest, who she didn't give a chance from the start. Jess laughs and tells her that she has high standards, and Mary thinks it's like that because her mother has no standards at all. She asks her about her father and Mary admits that he had left when she was a child. Jess's father passed away when she was just a child, so she knows what it's like not to have a father figure in her life. The nurse comes and Mary goes with him to get her hand stitched. Coming back home, she met with her mother drunk and dancing in the living room. She excitedly reveals that a taxi guy had invited her on a date. Mary gives her mother an attitude for being interested in a guy her age, but her mother doesn't let it slide as she advises Mary to lower her standards or she'll end up alone and miserable. The next morning, Mary works at the cash register when a girl she once beat up walks in. The poor girl freezes in fear and leaves without getting anything. Mary feels bad about it but doesn't say anything. As she's riding the bus on her way back, she spots Jess on the street and runs out to greet her. They walk together and Jess asks her how the dating is going. Mary admits that she's only looking for someone to go to the wedding with her. She invites Jess to hang out but Jess tells her that she has band practice. However, she invites her to a wedding that she's shooting the following day, and we see them on the bus together. Mary attends the wedding as Jess' assistant, and Jess tries to find her a date while there. As the party continues, a random man tries to dance with her but she leaves him in the end. Back at the hotel, Jess and Mary have the time of their life. Jess turns on the camera as Mary mocks the speech Colleen had written in her name. She thinks the speech is inaccurate as she claims that they've never been to school together, despite it being written in her speech. All of the nice words she has written about herself make Mary want to puke. They sit down later and drink while having some snacks. Mary calls Jess a terrible matchmaker and asks her why they're not looking for a date for her. Jess admits that she's not interested in looking, so Mary asks her how many guys she's been with. Not wanting to answer, she asks Mary the same thing, and Mary admits that she's not good at dating. Jess admits that she's not good at dating as well, and claims to have always been a loner. Mary finally tells her that she's been in jail for beating up a girl in the club. Jess is shocked but doesn't let it get to her. They spend the night drinking, dancing, and having fun. Waking up the next morning, Mary sees Jess laying next to her. She wakes up as well, and as she sits down, tension can be felt in the air. Looking into her eyes, Mary leans in and kisses Jess. They break the kiss off but Jess kisses her once again. Mary gets overwhelmed as tears fill her eyes. However, she assures Jess that she's okay and they continue kissing and getting intimate. On the way back, awkwardness can be felt on the bus. Mary avoids looking and talking to Jess. Getting off the bus, they stand opposite each other not saying anything, until Jess breaks the silence. She asks Mary whether she's freaking out about the situation, and she lies that she isn't. Wanting to calm her down, she suggests that their situation doesn't have to mean anything unless she wants it to be. Mary doesn't say anything, so Jess decides to leave because she's embarrassed. Before leaving, Jess invites her to a gig the following day and Mary promises to be there. Mary spends her day thinking about Jess and what they had. In the evening, she heads to the bar where Jess would be performing and supports her throughout. The next morning, they all go to a church to practice for the wedding. Charlene's cousin is trying to sing the song You Raise Me, but it doesn't sound right. The whole time, Jess keeps looking over to where Leona and Mary are sitting. Leona notices her staring and Mary makes her think that Jess is checking her out. After the practice is over, Charlene pulls Mary to the side to tell her some ridiculous news. Charlene tells her that she and Leona had seen John Carter getting off with a man in the club. Mary lets the fact that John might be homosexual totally over her head, as she asks Charlene why she isn't going to a club with her. Claiming that's not the point, Charlene assures Mary that she'll find her a date because she wants to make sure it's not someone weird. Pissed at her for trying to change her, Mary walks over to Jess and does the unthinkable. She asks Jess if she wants to go on a date sometimes before kissing her passionately. Leona and Charlene stare in shock as Mary and Jess share a kiss. After the church, the girls sit as Sally where Charlene asks Mary about her relationship with Jess. Mary tells the truth about what happened, but Charlene can't believe that she's into girls. "You're making a show out of yourself," Mary is what Charlene tells Mary, thinking that she'll put some sense in her. However, Mary shuts her up with, "Well, what's new, Charlene?" In the evening, the new pair has dinner at a local restaurant. Mary suggests they be on each other's dates as they're both going to the wedding. Jess agrees with it, but it looks like something's on her mind. Mary asks her what she's concerned about, and Jess can't seem to understand why Mary's so okay with the whole situation all of a sudden. She mentions the bus ride and how Mary didn't even want to look at her for 3 hours. Mary admits to all of it but claims that it's not that big of a deal. Jess asks her whether any of her friends had something to say about it, and Mary reveals that Charlene had said a lot about them being together. Jess thinks that Charlene might be worried about her, but Mary claims that Charlene doesn't care about her. All she cares about is her precious wedding. Worried, Jess asks her if that's the reason she's asking her to go with her to the wedding. She is suspicious about Mary using her to piss Charlene off. Mary claims that she doesn't care what Charlene thinks, but Jess thinks that she's obsessed with her and what she thinks. "I don't want to be used" pisses Mary off, and she starts yelling at Jess, demanding an explanation. Calmly, Jess asks her not to yell at her and admits that she doesn't want to be used so she can get even with Charlene. Mary claims that she doesn't plan on using her, so Jess calms down and goes to grab some more drinks. However, Mary leaves while she's turned with her back. She tries to call Mary, but she doesn't answer her. In the morning, Mary listened to the voicemail Sarah had left her the previous night. Not knowing what to do, she decides to visit Charlene. Showing up to her house might not have been the best idea, as the first thing Charlene says to her is, "What are you doing here?" Sitting down, Charlene asks Mary what's the story with Jess because she had called in the morning and canceled on working for the wedding. Mary admits that she doesn't know why she canceled and reveals that Jess is not her girlfriend anymore. Getting a paper out of her pocket, Mary hands it to Charlene and asks her to read it. Charlene argues that the speech has already been written, but Mary claims that it should come from her, and she should be the one to write it. Charlene opens the letter and it reads, "The things you need to know about Charlene. Her first crush was on Mr. Duffy, our geography teacher in the 5th class. Her first kiss was on the bus on the way home from a Boyzone concert. Her eyes are a mixture of green and brown and not hazel as most people think. She loves brown sauce and eats it on everything. She can never remember how a joke ends. When she's sick, she always watches the film Ella Enchanted and eats packets of Monster Munch. When she walks into a room, people always notice her and want to be around her. This is because of her warmth and her good sense of humor. She loves Declan more than anything else in the world, even brown sauce. And she's the best friend that anyone could ever ask for." Tears fill Charlene's eyes as she finishes the letter. Looking at Mary, she calls the writing lovely and thanks her for it. Mary smiles and claims that she wanted it to come from her heart. She asks Charlene to grab a pint, but she refuses as she's getting married the following day. She begs her, but Charlene stays true to her answers. Getting up to leave, Mary turns around and angrily asks Charlene why she doesn't want to see her anymore. Charlene tells her that she doesn't have time to argue, and Mary agrees that she only has time for herself. Before she leaves, she lets Charlene know that she has changed. Charlene has finally had enough, so she runs after her and lets her know that her actions have consequences. She reminds her of what she had put her mother and everyone else through, after doing such horrible things. She won't allow Mary to come a day before her wedding and call her a bed friend just because she doesn't want to go out drinking. She lets Mary know that she has changed, and even claims that everyone else has, the only person who stayed the same as Mary. But that doesn't help her as she's still the same mess she used to be. Who wants to be around that? Is the last thing Charlene says to Mary before getting back into the house. Her words get to Mary, and instead of trying to fix the situation, she turns to alcohol as always. Having a bad relationship with everyone, she calls her younger coworker and invites her and her friends to drink in a parking lot. The younger people find her funny as she acts out of pocket, but there is sadness inside Mary. That sadness comes out once she sees Jess in the same bar as them. As Jess is performing, Mary gets pulled to the front of the crowd, making her face Jess. Her emotions control her as sadness turns into anger, anger turns into agony. She starts yelling at the crowd, getting all the attention, but for a bad cause. The guards notice her disruptive behavior and run to her to kick her out. Being kicked out of the club for a millionth time upsets Mary, so grabbing the nearest big rock, she throws it at the bar, breaking the glass. Running off with some guy she met the same night, they hide under a bridge. The guy, being younger, thinks that Mary is a cool chick that doesn't care for the world, but he doesn't know the pain that she carries. The police soon arrive, and instead of running, Mary stays there and waits to be arrested. Her mother bails her out, but the police officer tells her that Mary might have to appear in front of a judge for the number of assaults she has done. Back at home, her mother comes to her room and asks whether it's her fault. Mary admits that it isn't as she breaks down into a puddle of tears. Her mother rushes to her side and comforts her as Mary breaks down in her arms. Waking up the next morning, Mary stares at the dress and contemplates going. She finally gets ready and we see her in front of the church waiting for the bride. Charlene arrives and Mary is stunned by her beauty. They get inside and Charlene gets married to the man of her dreams. At the reception, Mary gets approached by Charlene, who tells her not to do the speech she wrote because Leona will be doing a speech instead of her. Mary is heartbroken but she agrees, not wanting to start any drama on such a special day. She fights back tears as Leona gives the speech as the maid of honor. A basic speech compared to what Mary had written, which is something from the heart. As the ceremony is going, we see Mary outside trying to reach Jess on the phone. After saying that she's drunk, she stops herself and admits that she hasn't had a drink all day. She apologizes for the way things turned out between them and admits to not knowing what's wrong with her. She keeps hurting people but she doesn't know why. "I miss you" is the last thing she tells her before hanging up. Returning to the party, she sees everyone dancing, among them her mother. She's trying to dance with a younger man but she ditches her. Not wanting to see her mother dancing alone, Mary joins her on the dance floor. Her dancing gets everyone's attention and even the bride notices her. Charlene gets closer to Mary and they start dancing and having fun, just like in the old days. Doing the thing they used to do all the time makes Charlene emotional and nostalgic. She runs after Mary and stops her from leaving after the wedding's done. Thanking her for everything, she promises that they'll hit the town once she comes back from her honeymoon, just the two of them. Mary hugs her before heading her way, and Charlene begins to cry. Returning home, Mary takes some of the pictures off her mirror and as she's looking at them, her phone ringing catches her attention. Looking over her shoulder, she sees that it's Jess calling her. She answers the phone and things start looking a bit brighter.